In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to avoid all those rookie mistakes that will make your straight up crochet look straight up sloppy. So my first attempt at making this scarf about, say 10 years ago, made every rookie mistake known to man. So you look at it, you can clearly see it is not even in size throughout at all. So I was off to a pretty good start and just started dropping stitches. Went up very narrow down here. No idea how I did it. And my ends are terrible. Just covered in knots. Nobody taught me anything about weaving ends before I did this, or changing colors. This was just me trying on my own. No tutorial, no coach, and no good. So today I'm going to show you how to get nice, clean, beautiful edges, transition your colors smoothly, weave in those ends nicely, and have a much prettier straight up scarf experience. So let's get hooking. For this tutorial, you'll need 2 colors of worsted weight yarn. You can do this all as a solid, but I'm going to be showing you how to do stripes, so you'll need 2 colors. I'm using Plymouth Encore knitting worsted weight in colors 174 and 460. Unfortunately, they don't actually name their colors, so that makes remembering which ones you worked with a little difficult, but if you save your labels, that's what they're for. You'll also need a 5 or 5.5 millimeter hook. I'm using a 5.5 because I don't want my stitches to be too tight, but worsted weight does call for a 5 millimeter, so you can do it with that. And a darning needle for weaving in your ends. And of course, at the end of any project, you need scissors for cutting off. And when you do the stripes, when you're done with your secondary color, you'll need to cut it off. So, once you have your supplies, ready to begin with your main color, you will make a slip knot. Remember not to pull it too snug. And start your foundation chain by yarning over and pulling through the loop. You yarn over and pull through the loop. And just repeat that until you have about the width you want your scarf to be. Some people like skinnier scarves, some people like wider scarves, so I'm not going to give you an exact number. It's entirely up to you where you want it. Once you've got the width that you would like, you're going to chain 1 extra, and you're going to work in the second chain from the hook. The one on the hook doesn't count, so you're going to do count, not in this one, but this is the second one. And we're going to work into the bumps on the back of our chain so that we have a nice smooth chain on the end. And you're going to work in single crochet, so put the hook through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both loops. And then again in the next bump, all the way down to the end of that first row. Okay, now we're at the end, working our last stitch. Okay. I'm going to chain 1 and turn our work. Now, this is where people tend to make mistakes. This first V right here is where your chain is coming out of. Your chain counts as the stitch for that. So you don't want to work into that. And a lot of people, when they're explaining this, will say skip the first stitch. So people will look at it and go, oh, so I don't work into this one, I work into that one. So basically, if you work into this stitch that your chain's coming out of, you're going to add stitches. If you work into this one, you're going to drop stitches. So where you want to work is this first full stitch right here to keep it nice and even. And you're going to work straight across this row, doing single crochets in each stitch. Almost the end of our row. I know at this stage it's kind of twisty. See, it's spiraling. That will straighten out as you go. Okay, we're going to do our last stitch. And we chain 1 and turn our work. Right here that our chain is coming out of, the chain counts as the stitch for that stitch. So we're not working into there, we're working into here. And we're just, again, going straight across to the row of single crochet. And you'll keep following this pattern for however many rows you want the block of this color at the end of your scarf to be before you start striping. It really depends how thick you want that band before the stripes start. So work back and forth until you are where you want to switch colors. And I'll meet you back and show you how to do the color change. Okay, so I am at the end of row 6, and I've decided that 6 is the number of rows I'm going to be doing for all of my wide bands throughout this scarf. I like the look of that width, so I'm going to do my first set of stripes here. I'm going to my last stitch of the row, pulling up so I have the 2 loops. And now I'm bringing in my new color to finish the stitch. Stripping it over the hook and pulling it through. And pull all my ends, all my tails so that it's nice and snug. I'm going to chain 1 with the new color and turn my work. I'm not cutting off the old color. So the working yarn from the main body color, I'm going to run right along the edge of my work. And I'm going to just work over that. So when I put in this first stitch here, I'm making sure that that working yarn is on top of my hook. When I go through those loops, it's right there lined up with them. So when I finish my stitch, it's inside of the stitch. It's coming, you see how it's coming, the old color is coming out in between the threads of the new color there. We're going to work over it like that down the whole row. Okay, so we've got this nice clean stripe. I'm going for delicate stripes, so I only want my stripe to be one row, which means I'm going to switch colors back at the end here. Now, if you want thicker stripes, you want this to be more than one round, what you would do differently is you would only work over your old color to, say, about here before you cut it off. That way, you don't have to sew in the tail at the end because you worked over it, and you can continue. You'll only have one color on, and you get to the end, you can just continue in this color for however wide you want your stripe. But I'm going with a delicate stripe. I want it to be that one row. So as I come to my last stitch, make sure that that ends in there. Come to my last stitch. Start it with the color I've been using for this row. I have those two stitches on the hook. There's 2 loops on the hook. And then switch to the other color. Yarn over, pull through. Pull my yellow so it's tight. Chain 1 and turn. And we're going to do the same thing. Again, running that yarn along because we're going to stripe back and forth. We're doing 2 stripes of the yellow, so we're leaving that attached, running it so that it's going to get encased and worked over, and do a single crochet, go right across. Okay, and we're at the end, and I'm switching back to the yellow, so get my loops on my hook, and make sure that you're grabbing the working yellow and not this tail that you worked your way back to. You're going to yarn over and pull through, and chain 1 and turn. So right now you should have nice clean straight edges and 1 little stripe of yellow, back to red, or whatever colors you're using. Okay, and this is the last of our 2 little stripes. So our next step is going to be another block of 6 in our main color, 6 rows in our main color. So we're going to switch colors as usual, go through that loop, that stitch, pull through so you have 2 loops on your stitch, or pull through so you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops with the new color, main color is switching back to, chain 1 and turn. Now you want to work over your yellow, or work over your secondary color, which in my case is the yellow. Work over your secondary color. Just for a few stitches here. And because we're sticking with this color for a block and we're not switching back at the end, we don't need this to run all the way to the end, but we don't want to have a tail to sew in either, so we're going to work over it up to about here, say, doesn't have to be any exact stitch count. I just say, you know, give yourself a decent way in so it's not going to slide out, and cut it off. And wherever you cut it off at there, you just want to work over until it's completely encased. I like to just give it a decent amount of length so I know it's not going to get pulled out. And if you have an end sticking out a little bit there, you can just trim that. There you are. So you see, by working over it now, there's no end to weave in. So we did that whole stripe section, and the only ends we have to weave in this whole project so far are where we started with our yellow and where we started the whole project, instead of at the end of every color switch. And just keep doing single crochets to the end. So at this point we are repeating our pattern. So this first section was 6 rows of single crochet in our main color, and that's what we're repeating here. We just did row 1 of that, so now we're going to repeat row 2, chain 1, turn, make sure you're going to the correct stitch, and work across, and you just keep going back and forth in that color for your full 6 rows. When you get to the 7th row, you switch to yellow, and then do the red, yellow, and then repeat. You're just repeating that same pattern we just did until it's the length that you want it to be, and then you're tying off and weaving in the ends. Okay, my scarf is nowhere near done, but it is time to wrap this up so I can get my video posted on time. So I'm just going to quickly show you on this little sample swatch I made how to tie off, and I'll show you on here how to sew in some of your ends. And once I've demoed both of those things, you'll be able to finish this up all on your own. So, when you're done and you go to tie off, you're going to cut your yarn, leaving yourself a long enough tail to work with easily with needle, because you're going to have to weave it in. Then you're just going to yarn over, pull through your loop, and pull it all the way through and snug. That's all, and then you weave the end in. As for weaving the ends on your project, you're going to want to weave them into their own color, and you want the ends to be right in the middle, invisible, just like the pieces that you worked over. How the ones you worked over are like inside and you don't see them. That's exactly where you want your ends to be when you sew them in. So you're going to try to go in between the halves of your stitch. Go right inside of it. So you're running right along where it's not showing on the back. It's not showing On the front, it's just inside, encased in your stitches. And you pull through. And if you pull too tight, it's gonna like suck in your end, so you're just gonna stretch it. Once it looks nice and flat and straight there, and you don't have any major color loops anywhere, you've done well and can snip what's left. You just do that for all these little ends sticking out. This one here is easy to do because it's the whole section is its own color, so even if it does show a little somewhere by accident, it won't be the end of the world. And you should have a nice straight, clean edge. So as you can see, this one is coming along much more evenly and with no knots on the edges, nice and smooth, clean, crisp looking. So much better than my first rookie attempt. And this is what 10 years of practice will give you. Or hopefully watching this tutorial has shortened your learning curve. Now, if you are noticing yourself either dropping or gaining stitches, replay the video, because I do mention how both of those mistakes happen in here. You want to make sure that you are, okay, if you're dropping stitches, you want to make sure that you're A, working to the very ends of your row, into that last stitch, and B, not skipping the correct first stitch in your new rows. If you're gaining stitches, you want to make sure that you aren't working into the first stitch that your chain is coming out of, that very end, but the one next to it as your first stitch for every row that you start. I did point those things out in the video, so like I said, if you replay it, it's covered, but sometimes, even when if you're working quickly, if you're watching TV, you're distracted, mistakes happen. And the good thing about crochet is if you see the mistake when you're, so many rows out from it, it's unfortunate that you got to invest the time in redoing it, but it's very simple to just rip it out, get back to where you were when you made the mistake, and correct it. So if you take your time and work carefully and diligently, you can have a nice, straight, beautiful scarf. I will post pictures on Insta when this is finished. So if you want to follow me there to see it. This is actually the last tutorial in the Complete Beginner series. I am still going to be doing beginner level patterns going forward, but this is the last video I chose specifically to teach technical skills to the complete beginner. Everything else going forward will be using the technical skills that I taught in this series to make full projects. So I will see you in the next video. And in the meantime, work on your scarf, practice, have fun with it, keep on hooking.